Hello guys, you can see my new React channel and enjoy the speaker called Rian speech on the state of American politics.
The C-SPAN networks bring you long-form public affairs programming from the nation's capital and are a public service of your television provider. C-SPAN, created by cable.
Thanks, Lee. Go vote now. Appreciate it. Thank you. Let's hear it for Elise Stefanik. Huh? Don't forget to go vote. Thank you for your indulgence, and thank you for your patience. We have votes on the floor right now. I want to thank Elise Stefanik. She is inspiring. I also want to thank all of you for coming here today. I want to thank Kevin Brady, my friend, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, for hosting us here today. I had the privilege of joining this committee in my second term. My seat was right behind these flags. And it's a perfect setting for what I want to talk with you today about. Because it is here, in this committee, that we debate some of the biggest, most consequential issues. We debate our tax code, health care, trade, entitlement reform, welfare reform. This is a big deal to be on this committee. People strive to get on this committee. And understanding the privilege and the responsibility that came along with it, we took our jobs very seriously here on this committee. And we always held ourselves to a higher standard of decorum. We treated each other with respect. We disagreed, often fiercely so, but we disagreed without being disagreeable. I speak of this in the past tense only because I no longer serve here in the Ways and Means Committee. But it almost sounds like I'm, speaking of a different time, doesn't it? It sounds like a scene unfamiliar to many in your generation. Looking around at what's taking place in politics today, it is so easy to get disheartened. How many of you find yourself just shaking your head at what you see from both sides of the aisle these days? I see myself in each and every one of you. I came here as a curious college intern, trying to get a sense of everything, trying to figure out, where to take my own life. I would always ask older, more experienced people, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were my age? Well, here's my answer to that question. Here's what I know now that I want you to know, that you cannot maybe see yourself today. And this is not just a lesson for young minds, but a message for all Americans. Our political discourse, both the kind that we see on TV and the kind that we experience among each other, it did not used to be this bad, and it does not have to be this way. Now, a little skepticism, that is really healthy. But when people distrust politics, they come to distrust institutions. They lose faith in government. They lose faith in our future. We can acknowledge this, but we don't have to accept this. And we can't enable it either. My dad used to always say, you are either part of the problem or part of the solution, one or the other. So I have made it my mission as Speaker to raise our gaze and aim for a brighter horizon. Instead of talking about what politics is today, I want to talk with you about what politics can be. I want to talk about what our country can be, about what our founders envisioned it would be. America is the only nation founded on an idea, not on an identity. That idea is a beautiful idea. The condition of your birth does not determine the outcome of your life. Our rights are natural. They're God-given. They're not coming from government. Now, while it was a beautiful idea, it had never been tried before. Early on, our founders fought to establish a suitable order. They decided that we would not maintain this idea by force. In the first Federalist chapter, in the first Federalist paper, Alexander Hamilton, he wrote that in politics, It is absurd to aim at making converts by fire or sword. Instead, we would govern ourselves with the people's consent. Again, there was no manual for how to do this. That's why we call this whole thing the American experiment. It is still the American experiment. So they made each other, and they made those who came after take an oath to uphold the Constitution. Every generation since has inherited this responsibility. Leaders with different visions and ideas have come and gone. Parties have risen and fallen. Majorities in White Houses won and lost. But the way we govern endures through debate, not disorder. This is the one thing about our country, and this is one of the most important things about our country that makes it the greatest on earth. I must admit, I didn't always find this idea so exciting when I was young. As I said, I came to Washington unsure of what I was going to do with my life. And then I ended up working for a guy named Jack Kemp. You may have heard of him. He went on to represent the people from Washington, or from Western New York, but he was a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. One of the great quarterbacks of his time. And then he represented the Buffalo area in Congress in the 1970s and the 1980s. He served in the cabinet under President H.W. Bush. And like me, he was one of our party's nominees for vice president. I first met Jack Kemp exactly where you would expect, at Tortilla Coast. It was true. I was waiting tables, you know, like you. I had student loans coming out of school. I had a few jobs, and I was a waiter, and I waited on Jack Kemp. I didn't bother him that day, but I told a friend one day I would love to have the chance of working for that man. And as luck would have it, such an opening came up. The thing about Jack was that he was an optimist all the way. He refused to accept that any part of America or the American idea could ever be written off. Here was a conservative willing, here was a conservative eager to go to America's bleakest communities and talk about how free enterprise would lift people out of poverty. These were the areas of the country that had not seen a Republican leader in years, if ever. I had the chance to accompany Jack on some of these visits. I saw how people took to him. I saw how he listened, how he took new lessons from each experience. He found common cause with poverty fighters on the ground. Instead of a sense of drift, I, at that time, began to feel a sense of purpose. Jack inspired me to develop my professional life to public policy. It became a vocation to me. Ideas, passionately promoted, put to the test. That's what politics can be. That's what our country can be. It can be a confident America where we have a basic faith in politics in our leaders. That sounds like a long distance from where we are right now, doesn't it? It can be a place where we have earned that faith. All of us as leaders, can hold ourselves to the highest standards of integrity and decency. Instead of playing to your anxieties, we can appeal to your aspirations. Instead of playing the identity politics of our base versus their base, we unite people around ideas and principles. And instead of being timid, we go bold. We don't just resort to scaring you. We dare to inspire you. We don't just oppose someone or something, we propose a clear and compelling alternative. And we don't just win your support, we win the argument. We win your enthusiasm. We win hearts and minds. We win a mandate to do what needs to be done to protect the American idea. In a confident America, we also have a basic faith in one another. That's one of the most important lessons I'd love to confer to you. We question each other's ideas vigorously, but we don't question each other's motives. If someone has a bad idea, we don't think that they're a bad person. We just think they have a bad idea. People with different ideas, they're not traitors. They're not our enemies. They're our neighbors. They're our coworkers. They're our fellow citizens. Sometimes they're our friends. Sometimes they're even our own flesh and blood, right? We all know someone who we love who disagrees with us politically or who votes differently. But in a confident America, We are not afraid to disagree with each other. We don't look ourselves or lock ourselves into an echo chamber. We don't go into the echo chamber where we just tell us what we want to hear, where we take comfort in the dogmas and the opinions that we already hold. We don't shut down on people, and we don't shut people down. If someone has a bad idea, well, why don't we tell them why our idea is better? We don't insult them into agreeing with us. We try to persuade them. We test their assumptions. And while we're at it, we test our own assumptions too. You know, I'm certainly not going to stand here and tell you that I have always met this standard myself. There was a time that I would talk about a difference between makers and takers in our country, referring to people who accepted government benefits. But as I spent more time listening, really learning the root causes of poverty, I realized something. I realized that I was wrong. Takers wasn't how to refer to a single mom stuck in a poverty trap, trying to take care of her own family. Most people don't want to be dependent. And to label a whole group of Americans that way was wrong. I shouldn't castigate a large group of Americans just to make a point. So I stopped talking about it that way. And I stopped thinking about it that way. But I didn't come out and say this to be politically correct. I say this because I was just wrong. And of course, there are still going to be times where I and you and we say things that we wish we hadn't. There are still going to be times when I follow the wrong impulse. Governing ourselves was never meant to be easy. This has always been a tough business. And when passions flare, ugliness is sometimes inevitable. But we shouldn't accept ugliness as the norm. We should demand better from ourselves. We should demand better from one another. We should think about the great leaders that have bestowed upon us the opportunity to live the American idea. We should honor their legacy. We should build that more confident America. This, as much as anything, is what makes me an optimist. In knowing that ideas can inspire a country and help people. Long before I worked for him, Jack Kemp had a tax plan that he was incredibly passionate about. You have to remember this about Jack Kemp. He wasn't even on the Ways and Means Committee, the committee here that writes all our tax laws. Republicans were deep in the minority back then. So the odds of it going anywhere seemed remotely low, awfully low. But he was like a dog with a bone. He believed passionately in his ideas, even though the odds were stacked against him. He took that plan to any audience that he could get in front of. He pushed it so hard that he eventually inspired our party's nominee for president, Ronald Reagan, to adopt it as his own. And in 1981, the Kemp-Roth tax bill was signed into law, lowering tax rates, spurring growth, and putting millions of American families back to work. All it took was someone to put policy on paper, someone willing to put an idea on paper and to promote it passionately. This is the basic concept behind the policy agenda that House Republicans are building right now. As leaders, we have an obligation to put our best ideas forward, no matter the consequences. With so much at stake, the American people deserve a very clear picture of what we believe, of what we would do. Personalities come and go, but principles endure. Ideas endure, ready to inspire generations yet to be born. That's the thing about politics. We think of politics in terms of this vote or this election, but it can be so much more than that. Politics can be a battle of ideas, not a battle of insults. It can be about solutions. It can be about making a difference. It can be about always striving to do better. That's what it can be, and that's what it should be. This is the system our founders envisioned. It's messy. It's complicated. It is infuriating at times, but it's a beautiful thing too. Thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate it.